Hey, what's going on everyone? Mike from Go Cell Phone Repair for the weekly Thursday evening live stream. We've got a lot to talk about tonight. Among the topics that we will be discussing, new AppleCare Plus. Is it really worth the amount of money that you'll have to pay when you add in the deductible and all the other factors considered? Definitely want to do the math on that one before you spend the money because it is not cheap. No more headphone jacks, no more free dongles. I guess get a Bluetooth headset or you're on your own, it sounds like pretty much. Apple can delete purchased movies from your library. So if you have Apple TV and you buy something, don't just assume that you get to keep that movie forever. It's really strange, but that's how it works. It's in the fine print. PCs and Macs are at risk with a security flaw that apparently has been around for a while, just have a new version of how it's being executed. Facebook has granted access to users' data inappropriately. Shocker, I know, but this has been going on for about the last 10 years, and we're actually hearing some of the details on that one right now. Also, it's time for a 4-day work week. I wonder how many people would argue that that's not a good idea. Let's find out. It's time to talk tech. What's going on, everyone? I see. Hey, we're taking keeping track of what order everyone arrives in. That's pretty cool. We got Nate's Tech Services first. Emmer, I hope I'm saying it right. Yesin. Second, Carl Latuno. Third, asking for a prize. Man, I'm going to have to think about that one. I don't know what I could really give out at this point. The countdown, yeah, I figured that we got to build some excitement. Really, it's kind of a buffer to give people an opportunity to tune in, so to speak, so we don't have to cut anything off, won't miss out on it. Conspiracies, yes, it exists. Carl says, my girlfriend believes I am a good guy and she wants to marry me. Ismail from Indonesia. Hey, welcome to the stream. Magic. Hey, Wayne Taylor, what's happening, man? And Hawaii Sidecar is here. This is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be even more fun next week, so we're going to talk about that too. We got Nate from Nate's Tech Services in the chat. He is going to join me next week when we will be talking about conspiracy stuff, as you saw in the beginning of the video. I am super excited about this, friends, because as much as I enjoy tech and as much as I like to work on phones and try to solve problems and figure things out and keep track of what's going on, gotta admit, the conspiracies at the very least are interesting. You know, some of them are questionable, some of them are further out there than others, but they're all, for the most part, interesting to talk about, and that's what we're going to be doing right here. So Nate is going to propose one or more crazy conspiracy theories, as we're going to call them, and I'm going to be the skeptic. So he's going to try to convince me that one of these things is real, and I'm going to try to look at it from every angle that I can, ask a lot of questions and see if it makes sense. And then of course you'll all be invited to enter your comments into the chat and kind of, you know, give us some feedback and let us know what you think. So let's get this deal over here. I think this is where we want to be. I'm going to start off with the Apple stuff. Obviously we got Apple iPhones being announced yesterday, so all kinds of excitement, but I don't want to bore you for an entire hour because you've probably heard most of it already, but I think there's a few important things that a lot of people are going to want to know about this. Definitely not for the 4-day work week. Okay, hey, what's going on, man? What's happening? The Triforce symbol, that was actually some sort of Illuminati thing that I dug up on an image search. Maybe next week you can talk about the new TriStar tester. You know, it's not a bad idea. In fact, I'm going to be looking into those as well. How many hours a day for a 4-day work week? Well, if you do the math, I'm going to say probably 10 hours a day, Johnny, but we'll hit that one also on the end of the stream. That's the last topic I've got lined up right now. I did want to let everyone know, if you haven't already heard, the Apple iPhones that are going to be available will not ship with a headphone dongle. So not only have they completely eliminated the headset jack, there is no iPhone for sale anymore with the headphone jack. They cut off the 6S, they cut off the SE, which is a surprise. You know, a lot of people don't want a huge phone, and I'm just shocked that they decided to completely do away with the SE. Maybe they'll bring it back later on, but for the time being, you cannot buy a brand new iPhone from Apple that has the capability of plugging in a headset jack out of the box. Not only that, they're not even including a dongle so that you can use it to adapt your old headphones, your 3.5, so that it'll fit. So this is slightly discouraging, and at the same time, if you look at it from Apple's perspective, once you have the corner on any market, it's kind of up to you to do what you see to be in your best interest. And what does Apple always need to do? Well, we know that they've reached a certain point of saturation when it comes to phones. A lot of people I wouldn't say all, but a lot of people who want to have an iPhone have an iPhone. So if they don't have a good reason to upgrade to the next model or an incentive to, then how do you make more money on the back end, as they say? And one way that you do that is you start eliminating features from the new phones that you're selling so that the people who like your product or want your product have to spend a little extra money after they get that phone. So this is one of the approaches, it seems, and really who is going to challenge them? Because if you're not a fan of Android, you don't have a lot of choices out there unless you want to buy a flip phone or something like that. So you won't be getting a free headphone dongle with any new iPhone. Apparently, it feels that users either already have a dongle from their last phone or they feel like it's a widely enough spread product that it isn't necessary to include one anymore. Now, it doesn't seem like a big deal. We're talking about a piece of equipment that cost about $9, so you can assume that the manufacturing cost on that is significantly lower for Apple. But again, if you take that $9 and you multiply it by millions or tens of millions of people, that adds up to a lot of money. And I'm not saying that I like it. I'm just saying that from Apple's perspective, you have to squeeze every dollar out, because if with big companies, if you don't continue to grow, you're dying, and that seems to be the goal of everyone out there. And I'm not saying that it's sustainable indefinitely. I suppose as long as the population continues to increase, you'll have a wider customer or a larger customer base to sell to. But when you start eliminating features from your devices in order to make more money, which is arguably what's happening here, especially when you're selling a phone for up to basically $1,100, that's kind of crazy, right? Well, what's another way that you can make a little more money on that sale? You can offer extra services outside of the App Store. And one of the ways that Apple is doing that, of course, is they offer their AppleCare, which now has been changed. They have something called AppleCare Plus, and this will in fact cover loss and theft, which on the surface to me sounds like a good idea, because every time I hear somebody talk about any sort of protection plan or insurance plan, my first question is, what if you lose your phone? What if your phone gets stolen? If it's not covered by your insurance or your protection or whatever that is, then you're probably wasting your money, unless it's just insanely low as far as the cost and the deductible goes. So now we're throwing this into we're going to factor this in. If you lose your phone, if it gets stolen, you're going to be covered with a few conditions, I would say. First of all, the thing about this is that if you do have to make a claim based on a lost or stolen phone, you must have Find My iPhone enabled. So if that feature is shut off, apparently they will not honor this agreement. That's number one. Okay, that's at the top of the list. Now, I want to get to, let's look at the cost, first of all, because one thing about insurance that I would propose is that it's similar to gambling in a way. Now, I know that the wording is a little bit different, but let's think about it. If you invest in something, you're kind of hoping that it will pay off, right? And you could say that insurance is more of a protection. It's not really a wager. And I would say that, at least if you're gambling, you have a chance of coming out ahead. When you're buying insurance, it's usually mandated by some entity that says that you must have insurance, or you are so concerned about losing money or property or something else that you think that it's worth the investment, because the odds are you're going to have to use it someday. And the vast majority of us don't. We pay into that pool of money that that covers the cost of loss at some point for someone when they need it. And the simple answer is this: how likely are you to damage, lose, or have your phone stolen? That should be probably your number one factor, right, when it comes to making this decision. Beyond that, you really want to look at the numbers, and this is the bottom line. And again, when I talk to people that mention phone insurance and AppleCare and that kind of thing, I tell them this: if you are the type of person who often drops your devices into the swimming pool, or you misplace things all the time, or you can never find your remote, it's completely disappeared from your house, you don't know where it went, then there's a better chance that you might want to be one of those people who says, I probably should protect this investment, because there's a good chance that I'm going to have to file that claim, right? But look at the cost on this thing. If you have Apple's extended AppleCare Plus, what you're looking at, let's get to the bottom line here. So let's say you have the iPhone XS Max as your main daily driver, if you want to call it that. The overall cost, when you look at the AppleCare initially getting signed up and the deductible that you're going to have to pay, is $568. So it's pretty close to half the cost of the entire device. So what you're saying right there, if you want to call this a break-even proposition, is that you're expecting roughly a 50% chance that you're going to have to file that claim during the duration of your agreement with Apple for AppleCare, right? So that's number one. The second thing here that's not really on the surface and you really have to dig and look at the fine print to figure out is this. Are you getting a brand new phone when you file that claim? So if I go to Apple and I give them, what was the amount? I think it was $129 or $229 or something like that. Let's see, AppleCare Plus with theft and loss insurance is $100 more than Apple standard coverage. So if you've got an iPhone XS Max, initially you're going to pay $299. Wow. Yeah, you're going to pay $299 versus the normal $199. So you're already into this thing $300. Secondly, when you go to file that claim, you've got to pay a deductible, which is going to cost you, basically bring you up to that $568 amount. So you're going to pay another $268 deductible, it looks like. And here's what you're going to get from Apple as per the terms on their website. And I had to do some searching here, and they don't. The funny thing is, if you go to the AppleCare Plus page, which you can see, this is what we're looking at. AppleCare Plus for watch, HomePod, iPad, etc., including the phone. If you search for the word lost or stolen on here, I don't think that you get, oh, here we do. We do get lost. We do get lost on here. And when it comes to stolen, we do get stolen. Okay, obviously it's in the same sentence, Mike. Okay, so here's the thing though. Let's say your phone is lost or stolen. What exactly happens when you file this claim? You go to Apple and you say, I need another phone. And they say, paragraph 2.2, I guess here. If during the term plan you submit a valid claim by notifying Apple that the covered device has failed due to accidental damage from handling, resulting in unexpected and unintentional external events such as drops and damage caused by liquid, ADH, Apple will subject your payment to the service fee described below, which means you have to pay the deductible, obviously, repair the defect using new or refurbished parts that are equivalent in performance and reliability, or exchange the covered device with a replacement product that is new or equivalent to new in performance and reliability. So what they're saying is that yes, you might get a new phone, you might get a new screen, you might get a new whatever it is that you need to have replaced, or you might get something that is comparable, or excuse me, equivalent in performance and reliability. And I don't know how you can make that statement if you're talking about a refurbished piece of equipment. How is it equal to in performance and reliability if it's already been repaired one time? So it's not brand new off the factory line. I would suspect that they have criteria they use to determine whether it meets a specific standard. But in my mind, that means this. You're not necessarily getting a brand new piece of equipment. So even though the combination of your AppleCare enrollment plus your deductible equaling almost half of the cost of that particular device when we're talking about the XS Max, doesn't mean you're going to get a brand new replacement phone. It means you're going to get something that will take its place and Apple has deemed as being equivalent in performance and reliability. So think about that. And on top of that, obviously when you look at other model phones, the differences in the figures are going to add up. In the case of the iPhone 7, the lowest priced iPhone, a replacement will cost you $398, which means you only save $50. Okay, so in my mind, again, it would have to be a far greater than 50% chance of using this AppleCare coverage to justify the initial cost and the deductible that you're going to be paying. Otherwise, you're pretty much throwing money away. For me, I'm willing to risk the $51. And I got to say, even on this other one with the XS Max, if you're using the 64 gig version, by the way, they do get more expensive than this. You're going to end up spending $570 to replace that unit, which again, I've got to think there's at least a 50% chance that I'm going to need to use this coverage. And I'm not the type of person who I don't have those accidents happen to me. So, you know, throughout my entire history of owning phones, I think I had one that something went wrong with, and I don't even think it was a physical or physical abuse or liquid damage. It was just the phone stopped working, and it was an inexpensive phone. It wasn't a big deal. Obviously, if I fix phones, I'm going to be far less likely to use this kind of coverage. But I think for the average person, it's still questionable. Let's keep in mind that programs like AppleCare, any type of protection plan or insurance that you get, those companies are not nonprofit. They are in it to make money. So they say, hey, we're going to spread the risk out. But I think the risk is being spread pretty thick here. It's like if something happens to you, you're still out of pocket a lot of money. What do you guys think? I want to take a look at the comments here real quick. The iPhone Max is $1,500 in Canada plus taxes. Plus, Greg, add on your AppleCare Plus, and you're probably at about $2,000, I'm guessing. You know what? Oh, that's plus taxes. Yeah, so you're over 2,000 Canadian dollars if you want to get into this thing with the AppleCare Plus coverage. Has anyone seen the news about Venezuela implementing a universal low wage for all kinds of professionals and simple workers? I haven't. I heard something recently about the current administration proposing that we become involved in a military operation in Venezuela, and I don't know all the details on that, but I do remember seeing that in the headlines. Ace Venture, socialism's at work, and this is the interesting thing to me when people talk about socialism. You know, take a look at this. Take a look at any type of insurance. This is pretty much the definition of socialism. Everyone puts money into the pot until a few people need it, and then they draw out that benefit in some way to pay for their expenses. That, you know, is almost part of the definition of socialism to start with. So it's ironic to me when people complain about having things like socialized medicine, which, you know, whichever side you're on is fine. But when you come and look at something like this, it's almost identical. It's the way that insurance works. A whole bunch of people spending money to cover a few people who tend to experience these incidents probably more often than the rest of us. So that's another good debate we could have, don't you think, Nate? The top iPhone in Australia, 2,389 Australian. Wow. There's no limit to this, man. And, you know, honestly, as long as people keep buying them, why not? Why would you not keep making your phones more and more expensive until you hit the ceiling? Until people go, okay, that's it. That is enough. We're not going to do it anymore. Because if you don't do that, you're losing profit, right? If you have the potential to sell something for more money and people are going to buy it, who's really at fault for those price points when you think about it? I say vote with your wallet. They haven't disclosed the amount of RAM on the new phones. I don't know that one, Johnny. Google search and let us know, because I'm not sure about that. The home screen still looks the same. You probably still can't customize it. That's my biggest gripe, I think, with my home screen. Apple should offer a refundable insurance if your device is in good shape for a year or more. They should refund you back a percentage. Harvey, that's a brilliant idea. I'm sure they would never do that, but that makes a lot of sense, actually. They should offer you some sort of incentive, I think, to trade that phone in. I don't know whether it's a credit on your insurance or towards another purchase or whatever it is, but that makes a lot of sense. Won't bother you, Mike. Doubt if they will sell iPhone insurance to an alien. You have a good point there. I wouldn't buy it anyways. It's not the XS Max, Mike. It's the iPhone XS Max. Okay, well, at least they're not calling it the iPhone Maxi Pad, because I really, for a while, thought that that's what it is. I mean, it just sounds too much like it. I know it's some old humor. $2,000 for a phone. Not me. You can buy a second-hand car for that price. Just bought a car from Japan. Wow, cool. Pretty sure my first car as a kid was less than $1,000. I think I remember that, Matt. It probably was. My first car was $1,950. I remember that specifically, and then I destroyed it and had to continue paying it off for like 2 years, which sucks. So don't take the corners too fast, right? Vote with your wallet. Yeah, exactly. First car back in '83 was $700. All right, so let's move along here. We saw the Apple terms again. Most of these links will be in the video description, so don't take my word for any of this stuff. Feel free to explore them yourself and come back and tell me, hey, Mike, you missed something. Here's what it really said, because I did not write the article. Apple can, in fact, delete purchase movies from your library without telling you. So if you're buying, and I would assume, we've actually heard this from several companies, not just Apple, also Amazon, and I think there are a few other out there where we've heard these accusations, allegedly, before, where people have purchased movies so that they're in your library. You can stream them on demand when you feel like it, and for whatever reasons, they end up disappearing, and you no longer own those movies. So it happened with Kindle. It's happening with Apple TV right now, and this was brought to our attention by a person named Anders G. Da Silva, who goes by D. Randers SGS on Twitter. And yeah, when you buy a movie on iTunes, it's yours forever until such a time when Apple maybe loses the rights to distribute it, and then it will disappear from your library without a trace. So don't get too used to the idea that when you buy the digital rights to something that's going to be streamed, that it's going to be there forever. The content provider, this is how Apple responded when he lost 3 movies that he bought through the iTunes store. The content provider has removed these movies from the Canadian store. Hence, these movies are not available in the Canada iTunes store at this time. Hence, he doesn't get to watch them anymore. So, of course, he complained and said, hey, this is kind of crazy. I bought these movies, I own them, and now you're telling me I don't have access to them anymore. How about my money? What's going on? I want to buy these movies. Well, according to the terms of service, which no one ever reads, except maybe for one of our future guests who's coming up soon. We do have an attorney who is going to appear and hopefully help us make some sense of all these crazy terms and information that we have. Most people don't go into the terms of service, especially when they're like 50 pages long. I mean, really, who has the time? So he said, hey, Apple, I bought 3 movies. They disappeared from my library. And Apple said, oh, yeah, those aren't available anymore. Thank you for buying them. Here are 2 movie rentals on us. So we can't replace the movies that you bought, but we'll give you a couple free rentals instead. And he said, wait, what? Tim Cook, when did this become acceptable? And Tim Cook, probably from his yacht, tweeted back, no, I'm kidding. Actually, Apple's response was, yeah, we take your money, but we are not responsible for what is sold, and we certainly do not guarantee that you get to keep anything in our storefront. We only guarantee that we get to keep your money. What? No, that was him replying to himself, I guess. That obviously wasn't Apple. So, see, the buy button is meaningless. It should be called feeling lucky. Apple says, I see you are unhappy, have 2 more rentals on us. So, content may not be available for re-download if that content is no longer offered on our services. Obviously, what happened here is that there was some copyright issues, and the owner of the movie said, we do not want our content in the iTunes store anymore. And that affects anyone who has purchased these movies through iTunes. Like, once they say iTunes is not licensed to distribute this anymore, even if you purchased it, you no longer have access to that content. Back in 2009, Amazon customers noticed that their copies of 1984 An Animal Farm by George Orwell were suddenly missing. It's very strange that it's those 2 particular movies, particular books. It turned out the copies were created by a seller that did not have rights to the book. Okay, fair enough. And when Amazon found this out, it pulled the books directly off of all the Kindles that had downloaded them. So obviously this is a failure on Amazon's part to vet the seller of these books beforehand. It's not really their fault. They're complying with the license agreement. I understand that, but it shouldn't have been on the market in the first place. Later, the company acknowledged that this was maybe not the best course of action. Well, I mean, what can you do there, really? In 2012, Amazon decided to terminate the account of another user, who then lost access to 43 Kindle books she had purchased. When she protested, Amazon's UK arm chided her. Amazon.co.uk and its affiliates reserve the right to refuse service, terminate accounts, remove or edit content, or cancel orders at their sole discretion, which was pretty much the response I get every time I contact Amazon's customer service. So I've given up on trying to get them to see things my way. Yeah, so be careful what you buy, I guess, but mainly this should be concerning to anyone who is purchasing digital content that's going to be streamed, and it certainly seems like the responsibility of securing these rights should fall on the party that distributes that content. It shouldn't be, hey, sorry, we're taking your stuff back. I mean, I suppose if they give you a complete refund on it, but still kind of concerning, I think. Let's see, where were we? It's good for us iPhone repair, less people buying AppleCare. I will tell you this, Wayne, one thing that I can say is that the more the prices go up on iPhones, the more job security that we have in general, right? There was an argument made a long time ago that as phones become cheaper and more disposable, we're going to be out of work because people won't be able to justify paying to get them fixed. Well, as long as Apple is selling more phones, at least here in the US, than anyone else, I think we're in a pretty good spot, which I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying if you want to keep fixing phones, Apple is going to keep us in business for a while. Nate, Mike, do you guys offer insurance to your customers? Maybe another revenue source. Actually, Harvey, I have worked for more than one company that offered protection plans for devices. And there are some challenges there for a number of reasons. First of all, you have to be very careful about the term insurance, because if you're not a licensed insurance, what's the word for it? I guess agent or company, you can't present that as insurance. You're not allowed to use that term at all, at least in the state of California. So you can sell a protection plan. And one of the tricky things apparently about protection plans is that, you know, the same challenge that a lot of health clubs have, and that is keeping those monthly payments coming in. Because of the high rate of credit card fraud that we see, people tend to change credit card numbers, bank accounts, you know, even checking accounts more often than they did historically. And for that reason, what ends up happening is people experience interruptions in their protection coverage, and they're not necessarily aware of it. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But if you can't get a hold of the customer and say, hey, we have to cancel your policy because your credit card number has changed and you haven't updated it, and the customer doesn't respond back to you, once you cancel that coverage and they do experience an event and have to make a claim, guess what news you get to give them? You're not covered anymore. So it's a tricky spot to be in anymore. This is something that's happened. All right, see you later, Matt. Good seeing you on here. I hope you're still here when I say goodbye. Yeah, so you got to be careful about that for the most part, but it's become a lot more complicated than it was in the past. So I don't offer insurance to or protection plans to customers currently. Tim Cook is a Freemason. Oh, is he? That's interesting. That's why I pirate what I want. I don't use... this is me reading comments for the record. I just have this feeling that one of these days something I say is going to be taken out of context, and they'll say, you said this on your stream, that people should pirate stuff. I never said that. We know that it happens. I don't endorse it. I don't use Amazon anymore, said Harvey. I'd rather use AliExpress and wait a month rather than Amazon's poor customer service. Yeah, I could do a whole hour on Amazon. Really, I'm surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised that apparently Bezos is giving away like a huge amount of money to this program for homeless people, which shocked me. I thought he was going to pull like a Steve Jobs and never give any money to charity, at least not publicly, but apparently he does. And at the same time, you can see, and we've heard a lot about how Amazon has become, you know, one of the two biggest companies in the world. And you don't do that by giving a lot of money away to your employees or your customers, obviously. And I also saw something recently that said that, you know, people love Amazon because it's easy to order, you get quick delivery, and it's inexpensive. And I'm going to debate that third point, because in many cases it is presented as being the least expensive alternative, but it is not necessarily always the case. Nate does not offer insurance, but he does take care of his customers beyond warranty periods, similar to insurance without the premiums. Hey, same here. Very similar situation. Tim Cook faked Steve Jobs' death. Jobs is living on his mansion on Dark Side of the Moon. Wayne, you're going to have to be here next week. Buggered if I know if Tim Cook's a Freemason. I'm just giving you work materials for the conspiracy show. All right. Well, we should certainly look into that. It's entirely possible. All right. So another thing here I wanted to bring to your attention. If you own a PC or a Mac, which most of us do, a lot of us do, there is a security flaw that may be leaving your encrypted data exposed. Not just your data, but your encrypted data. It has to do with the way the computer boots up. I am not going to get too detailed on it because it is not my area of expertise. What is going on here? Stop giving me all these pop-up things. So access to sensitive data is gained through a 2008 style cold boot attack, where the hacker forces a computer to restart without going through the normal shutdown process. The computer's data is briefly accessible in the RAM after power is lost, but many modern devices overwrite the RAM to prevent unauthorized access to data during this type of attack. Researchers discovered that there is a way to disable the overwrite process, essentially reviving the decade-old method of attack. So this is something they were doing 10 years ago. It is resurfacing because someone figured out another way, and I think that if there's anything in the way of data storage or transfer that we think is bulletproof, there's really not, no such thing. There's always going to be a way to get into it. There will ultimately be a way to hack into any phone, any laptop, any tablet, you name it. You know, it's just a matter of how badly someone needs to get inside of it. And we've seen this happen over and over throughout history. It's more a matter of which system is the most secure, not which one is 100%. Hackers would need physical access of your device for this particular hack, so that's kind of the good news. It's not like something they can do remotely. They've got to be in front of your computer to make it happen. If a hacker has physical access, the exploit can be conducted in approximately 5 minutes, so you don't have to walk away for very long in order to experience this problem. And newer Mac systems, remember, we always think that Macintosh or Apple products are automatically, you know, immune if you talk to a lot of people, but most of us think that they are much more secure in general than Windows platforms. And I would agree with that to a certain extent, but it certainly seems that the more prolific any particular operating system becomes, the more likely it will be targeted by hackers. And I think this has a lot to do with why we've seen so many attacks on Windows, you know, up until now, because everyone had a Windows machine, because it was a very small percentage of people who could really justify the cost of buying an Apple computer. I mean, you get a nice ergonomically designed piece of equipment that does what it's supposed to and starts up fast and shuts down. But for the most part, when it comes to performance, you end up spending a little more money, and most people don't see, you know, up until now, a lot of people couldn't justify that extra money. Well, now that we have so many Macs on the market, we have so many iPhones out there, and Apple has become so popular, it makes a lot of sense that people who are concentrating their efforts on hacking into systems are going to say, hey, maybe it's time that we start paying attention to Apple devices. And then we all have to move over to Linux, which I'm in the process of learning finally. Newer Mac systems with a T2 chip are not affected by this attack. I already looked this up, and guess what? Here's where the T2 chip is. Sounds like Terminator 2. The T2 chip is included in the iMac Pro and in the MacBook Pro models starting with 2018. So those two categories of devices are okay. But if you have a MacBook Pro that's older than 2018, you do not have the T2 chip, so you do not have that immunity to this particular attack. Microsoft claims that enabling pre-boot authentication with a PIN or startup key with BitLocker could help mitigate these risks. However, if you have Windows 10 Home Edition, you don't have that option. So for anyone who is out there not running, running Windows 10 Home Edition, no PIN apparently. So something to be aware of at the very least. But for the most part, the reason I chose this article is because it's amazing how much people take for granted, or in some cases just say, oh, well, I don't have any control over it, whatever. But this kind of stuff will be, I'm going to say, as definite as death and taxes. As long as we live in the age of digital information, we will have people attempting to hack, crack, or otherwise compromise these types of systems. And while it may not be a huge concern for us as consumers, it's certainly got to be a concern for people who are involved in government and military and law enforcement agencies, because if a computer can be hacked, or a bank or financial institutions or anything beyond that, because obviously there's a lot more at stake in those situations. So we got to continue to play this cat and mouse game of, we found a new security flaw, somebody needs to fix that, and then someone else will find another way to get in. And I don't think there's an end to this cycle. Maybe ultimately artificial intelligence will offer us some sort of permanent solution, but then you would think artificial intelligence will probably be used in order to get past any safeguards that we end up implementing. So who knows? That's just my crazy conspiracy theory right there. So let's go back to the comments here. Tim Cook is not a Freemason. He is a luxury Mason. That particular hack was instigated by the U.S. government in association with Jimmy Hoffa. All right, you guys are killing me, but let's read the comment. This is Wayne Taylor. That particular hack was instigated by the U.S. government in association with Jimmy Hoffa. Can I say anonymous? Oh, I can say anonymous. Who both lives on Mars now and use it to spy on us having sex in the privacy of our own home. Okay. This one is hilarious. Tim Cook also released a new kind of customer. What? Tim Cook released a new kind of customer who can afford the iPhones. Crooked politicians from Venezuela. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, that's the actual article. I'll have to check that out. Nate says we should totally do the moon landings, Mike, so we can cover the Steve Jobs comment. Okay, friends, we want to know. Nate's in the chat now. I'm here right in front of you. We have some ideas that we've been throwing around for conspiracy theories to discuss. There's just so many of them. There are the fake moon landings. There is the idea that we may be living in a computer simulation. There is the 9/11 stuff. There's the Illuminati. What is your favorite topic for conspiracy theories, or are they all equally as entertaining? Because we're going to come up with something within the next 2 days. I'll add it to the video description for next week. And by the way, that's going to be at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, not at 6 p.m. So I hope you all can make it. This is going to be a lot of fun. I know it's not super convenient for some of you, but this is the only way that we can make it work. So Hawaii Sidecar says 9/11, Nate. So that is vote number 1 is for 9/11. Computer logic is open to flaws because of its inherent design. You can just black box so much before all standards become uncompatible or incompatible. Yeah. You probably know way more about that than I do. UFO, Area 51, NS4. What's NS4? Nate says I second that. Okay, cool. So we got a couple ideas already here. So far, 9/11 and Area 51, which I had completely skipped over. That's another good one. Keep them coming. If you guys have ideas, please put a vote in there. And let's see, he seconded Hawaii's, which was 9/11, which I think that is also a very complex and interesting topic. I have looked into a lot of that stuff too. So, but Nate is going to try to convince everyone pretty much, and I'm going to be the skeptic, and I'm going to question everything, and we're gonna get to the bottom of this conspiracy stuff. Okay, we're gonna come up with an answer. Is it real or isn't? That's the point of the discussion or debate, if you will. All right, so we talked about the MacBook T2 chip that most of us don't have. S4, man, you need to Google that, buddy. More top secret than Area 51. Okay, I'm going to have to look into that. Nate, do you know anything about that one? I don't. Facebook granted inappropriate access to its users' data to more than... What? Okay, I'm going to read this again. I don't write these, but sometimes English is a little off. Facebook granted inappropriate access to its user data to more than 60 companies. Okay, that sounds right. Including Amazon, Apple, BlackBerry, and Samsung, according to a report. Another shocking headline, right? I know we all know this. Facebook is in a lot of trouble right now. People are deleting their Facebook accounts in large numbers, if that's even possible. I think you delete it and it's still there somewhere, right? It's still on their servers, just not publicly available. This new publication suggests the partnerships could be in breach of a 2011 consent decree by the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, which in my mind is one of the good organizations that we have nowadays. It seems to be concerned with consumer rights and the rights of the citizens, unlike many other federal agencies, which barred Facebook from granting other companies access to users' data without explicit consent. I don't know how to pronounce this person's name, but I'm going to say Aime Archibong argued that the partnerships were necessary because there were no app stores in the early days of Facebook. Kind of makes sense, but you know, without telling people about this, and again, it's probably in the small print in those little terms and conditions that none of us read. They go on to say, a previous post by Mr. Archibong in April this year noted that Facebook was winding down the data access permissions granted now that app stores are commonplace. And there's a whole argument here is that when there wasn't an app store, how did you get the advertisements in front of your customers? You had to share that information with advertising companies. But if you're doing that without telling people about it, then obviously there's a problem. So if it wasn't disclosed, then maybe Facebook will be in even more trouble. I don't know. That company has done and is doing a lot of weird stuff lately. Face ID is a ploy to steal our identity and replace humans with robots from Boston Dynamics. Harvey, I know you're kind of kidding, but I'm suspicious as to what we're going to do with all of this Face ID information that is only stored in the phone, right? Isn't that the story, at least for Apple products, that when you use Face ID, all of that information is stored on the phone and is not shared with Apple? I think that's the way that they presented it. And if you talk to the average person, they're going to say, yeah, right, whatever, you know, it's probably going to Apple and not really care about it. My question is, if you do compile that data somewhere and you can identify, it's basically like the average person who owns a phone with Face ID has just volunteered to put their mugshot into a database that some private company is holding on to. I think that would be, you know, my conspiracy theory scenario, is they're collecting everyone's face. Why? It's got to be for profit in one way or another. But whether they're going to replace us with robots from Boston Dynamics, I hope not. After seeing that dog, I got to tell you, I would imagine kids would watch that video and have nightmares about that thing, especially if they saw the Black Mirror episode. Let me back up here a minute. I missed a couple. Did you ask if I know Bigfoot? Yes, I've been looking at it this week already. I only use a sock puppet in Facebook to poison their well. Thank you. I appreciate that. I will be doing the same thing. I've actually got about 3 or 4 Facebook accounts that I just use because I don't want people sending me stuff they don't need to. And my Facebook account is pretty much there so I can find people that I knew from high school and vice versa. And otherwise, I don't really participate outside of my business page because, you know, you kind of have to, right? I don't want to convince, but rather discuss why people don't believe the official story we're told. Okay, fair enough. Let's do that. If the computer flaws is starting to pop up elsewhere now, must be because of government mandatory implementation of backdoors after all this post 9/11 world of terrorism deterrence starting. Yeah, a lot of things have changed after 9/11 for sure. But if you want to influence people's behavior, the most powerful motivating factor is fear, and 9/11 certainly brought a lot of fear, and for the most part a pass for the powers that be to say that this is what we're doing. And people said, well, I'm afraid, so go ahead and do whatever you're going to do. So stand in line at the airport for 3 hours and don't complain about it, I guess. A lot of weird stuff happened because of that. I use Iris Unlock on my S8 Plus. Well, I got your Iris now, Hawaii. Works well. I concur with you because of the CyberDog having your mutt face. What? The fingerprint sensor on my Pixel 2 is super fast and accurate. What about Nut Unlock? What? Butt Unlock. Okay. Facebook have been sharing data to help rich people invest better. I mean, you just need to ask Elvis his current net worth. He's not dead. He's living in Malibu. Okay. Yeah, business page. I got a few sales. Yeah, for sure. You have to have a Facebook. You got to have a Twitter. Probably should have a YouTube. But, you know, for business purposes, obviously a little different. Black Mirror 4 is a conspiracy on its own. Yeah, Black Mirror is such a great... They've actually approved a new season, so I think they're announcing it later this year, which is I'm really looking forward to. I'm a big fan of that. There are lots of cool stuff. Lots of cool ideas. I don't know how they come up with that, you know, and in fact, a lot of other companies have tried to kind of do something similar to Black Mirror. They had one on Amazon that was, you know, okay, but not great. But since, I want to say since The Outer Limits, if you remember... They did a remake of The Outer Limits in the late 90s, and they did a pretty decent job with that. But since then, it's been hard to find, in my opinion, within 1 hour, just a standalone program that's in that genre that's really entertaining to watch. And Black Mirror did such a great job. I wish that Netflix would just give them a bunch of money and say, start pumping these things out. But then, of course, you know, the quality would probably suffer, I would assume. Tim Cook and Steve Jobs are Chinese. They're harvesting data and sending it to China. Well, I think that a lot of data is being harvested and sent to China, Harvey. I'm not sure if it's coming through Tim Cook. Could be. No way near Black Mirror. Which one are you referring to, Amir? Unacknowledged great doco on Netflix UFO conspiracies. Oh, I'll have to check that out. I was getting into a whole bunch of Netflix cult films. If you haven't seen them, there's some really cool stuff on there about all these various cults that took place. You know, the Rajneeshis and the Hollywood cult, and there's a number of other ones out there, and they're filmed for the most part like documentaries, which is cool. So you get to see the actual news footage and the actual videos of this stuff going on. And there's also, I want to say that there's one on Scientology as well. And I really hate to do this, folks, but I think somebody left the dog outside. So if you'll excuse me for about 30 seconds, I need to go let Sammy in. I'll be right back. That's as close as we get to a commercial break. But if I leave him out there too long, he tends to wander, and then he gets out of the fence and gets probably running out and they get run over by a car. Hey, come on, guys. 30 seconds. Not that much. Jim Jones still biggest. Oh, yeah. I completely forgot about that one. The Jim Jones ones. God, that's tragic, but definitely worth watching and seeing like what people will buy into. It's just crazy. UFOs are fake, and the governments around the world are preparing a fake alien invasion to massacre people and fully mind control the rest. Check out EST from the 70s. Another weird cult. Okay, wow. I'm going to keep this chat so I can go back and search this stuff. Dog outside just retouching your makeup. What? Get out of here. Mike doesn't really have a dog. Oh, I don't have a dog. You want to see my dog? Hold on a second. Sammy, come here. Just to prove it. Sammy, come here. Come on. Come on. Come on. Here you go. Mike has a dog. See, this is my dog. They're over there, Sammy. Look, 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 look over there. He doesn't like me holding him up like this. This is my dog. See, there's the camera. Look right there. All right. You want to sit here? Okay, you can sit here. See, I have a dog. Anyhow, where were we? There was something that... Okay, I'm going to come back to you because I totally forgot where I was. The first instance was the Pentium 3 serial number implementation. After that, they just don't notice those features. It's a CGI dog. Okay. Hey, Nate, you know what I was going to say, Nate, is one other one that I thought of was the whole FEMA thing. That's another interesting one. You've probably already seen the proposed, supposedly they're setting up facilities to start rounding up people and put them in the equivalent of like concentration camps with all these FEMA build-out stuffs. And ironically, I want to say just yesterday, they diverted something like $10 million worth of funds from FEMA to ICE, which is really weird in, considering there's a hurricane getting ready or has hit the East Coast or is getting ready to. Yeah, definitely a trippy one. It's not a dog. It's an overgrown rat. That is entirely possible, Wayne. He may be an overgrown rat. We're actually getting his DNA, whatever you call it. They have that for pets now. Yeah. And we think he might be a deer-headed Chihuahua and or a Min Pin, what's the name of the wiener dog? What do you call those things? He may be Min Pin Dachshund, or he may be a deer-headed Chihuahua, but I don't know. He's some kind of mix. Did the USA know Pearl Harbor was going to happen? Oh, man, that's another good one, Wayne. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, not only that, but here's another one. If you haven't already heard, I've read from more than one source that the Japanese basically surrendered before we dropped the second or maybe even the first nuclear bomb. But we went ahead and did it because we wanted to be able to demonstrate what would happen. So that's probably another one worth discussing. See, now we're brainstorming. Now we're coming up with good stuff. So I'm going to switch over here. Keep the conspiracy ideas coming for sure. I thought this is an interesting article. It's time for a 4-day work week, argues labor expert. Now, this is in the UK. This is not here in the US, but I still think it's interesting. The 4-day work week is the holy grail for many workers. And as you asked earlier, Johnny, what they've done in some areas is to decide that, all things being equal, if you don't have to be open 5 days a week or 7 days a week because you've got customers coming in, or you can even stagger schedules to make it happen. But rather than working 5 8-hour days, you could simply work 4 10-hour days. And although we know that there's kind of an optimal number for performance for most people, we've generally come up with the 8-hour day because after about 6.5 hours or so, most people's production levels tend to diminish. Basically after lunch, it kind of starts to go downhill. But 8 hours seem to be kind of the sweet spot where you could get the most productivity out of one single person in a single day, and anything beyond that and they start to suffer. However, if you give them 3 days off instead of 2, that seems to be sort of an incentive to perform, and it kind of compensates for the amount of work that they have to do on those 4 days. There's also some talk about the cost savings for overhead in the way of utilities. Basically anytime you have to keep a building open, you've got to pay to run the electricity. Certain times of year, you've got air conditioning and heating and so forth going. So if you can get the same amount of productivity in that 40-hour period in a 4-day stretch instead of 5, then it makes a lot of sense for, in certain situations to just be open 4 days and close the other, and everybody's happy and they get a long weekend. So under the right situation or under the right circumstances, it looks like it can work, or it has worked already. Speaking at the Trade Union Congress's annual gathering in Manchester, the organization's General Secretary Francis O'Grady backed the 4-day working week as a very real possibility. Now, for all of us who are in business for ourselves, that's obviously not really an option. And it's funny because a friend of mine and I were having a conversation recently, because we will a lot of times get people who say, oh, well, you're self-employed, you can work whenever you want to. And it's kind of the perception that because you're self-employed or you work from home, that you sit around all day just, doing work at your leisure and there's not a whole lot to do. And, the fact of the matter is, in most cases, it's going to be more work than it was when you were employed by someone else, where when you go home, you're done. You clock out and you're finished. When you're self-employed, it doesn't really work that way. So his response now when people say, oh, you're self-employed, you got it made, you can work whatever hours you want to, he says, yes, that is entirely correct. I can work whichever 14 hours of the day I choose to. And a lot of times that ends up being the truth, especially if you're trying to track down the fault on a liquid damage phone or something along those lines. Let's see, where do we go? Where are we? Let me back up here. I got a whole bunch of comments I missed. Hollow Earth, yeah. That I actually read about that one recently. I already work a 4-day week, have for the last 3 years. Well, you Australians are always ahead of us. That's the thing. Just do a 2-day work week, 20 hours a day, and then relax the other 5 days. I have a feeling that might not work for everyone, but if you could do it, I wouldn't mind working one 24-hour day a week. Harvey, really? Man, if I don't get my sleep, I start hallucinating, so I don't think that would work for me. But if you could work a 24-hour day, I guess if you're an EMT or a firefighter or a number of other service providing people, sometimes you work those kind of hours, right? Definitely if you're in the military, if there's a combat situation going on, you don't always have the option to sleep. So I suppose that is a thing. I don't think it would be optimal for long term though. The moment a war breaks out, all the intelligence is for naught if it failed to prevent such a conflict. Good point. 2-day shift, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and 2 night shifts, 6 p.m. to what? Okay, I'm going to try to read this. 2-day shift, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., then 2 night shifts, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., 3 days off, then extra day every fortnight. That's what you're doing, Wayne? Because I think that would throw off my sleep schedule a lot. Does sleeping count as working? I think it does, Johnny. I think being on call in some situations, the sleeping actually counts as work hours. Good point. Self-employed, I work harder. Yeah, Hawaii. I think that's the big surprise a lot of people have when they go into business for themselves is it's not less work. It's not more freedom. It's just flexibility, but you definitely end up putting in your time. Hey, Greg M., how you doing? No one will do the work if you are self-employed. There also no one to fill if you want to take a holiday. That's a good point. This is one of the things I struggle with is if I want to take a vacation, what do? Just tell people to stop sending me broken phones. So that is a tricky one if you don't have someone to cover for you. And you certainly can't scale if you aren't able to train people to do the same thing that you do. So that's kind of what I'm up against at the moment. Yep, remember I'm still a cop. Phone repair is my side business. Oh, so you're doing phone repair and still coppering, right? Sleep does count because a full shift gives you what? 30-minute lunch and 2 breaks for 15 minutes each. So 20-hour work day could give you like 2 hours of sleep during the day. That should be plenty, right? So serial entrepreneur and the UK's 8th richest citizen. After you go past third, don't make that reference. That sounds silly. I mean, he's wealthy, but come on. The 8th richest citizen, Richard Branson, also believes the 5-day working week needs to be readdressed. Ideas such as driverless cars and drones are becoming a reality, and machines will be used for more and more jobs in the future. And what's cool is this is coming from Branson. This, I think, if there's any example of someone who is extremely wealthy and successful when it comes to being an entrepreneur and still takes good care of his people. I mean, you've got an island that is a private island for Virgin employees to take their vacation at. That's pretty cool, right? This is a guy I think believes in morale. However, if governments and business, it says on the face of it, it sounds like bad news for people, and he's referring to automation. However, if governments and businesses are clever, the advance of technology could actually be really positive for all people all over the world. That is unless the very few have total control of all the automation, and then they just say we get all the wealth and everyone else is out of a job. So that is certainly not a sustainable scenario to be in. And this is another topic. I'd love to do an entire hour on this, and this is talking about automation, things like universal basic income, and what we're going to do when jobs start disappearing because of self-driving cars and artificial intelligence and things of that nature. Because the bottom line is, yes, we now have, and we've always kind of operated on this principle. You know, when you talk about work ethic, where does that come from? It comes from us evolving as a species and realizing that every member of the tribe, every member of society has a role and has to contribute in order for that tribe or that nation or whatever it is to thrive and to continue to survive. When we reach the point which we are approaching, where machines do the vast majority of the work, where does that leave all of the other people? You know, you'll still have musicians and you'll still have social workers, and there are different occupations that are going to be very difficult to be taken over by machines, but a lot of them won't be, especially when it comes to things like factory work, driving. They're even talking about medicine and legal work being done by artificial intelligence in the future. So where does that leave all these people who will no longer have a job, you know, other than looking for some other way to contribute to society? And to what level will that be necessary? I mean, think of how fast technology is outpacing evolution, you know, and if you could imagine some sci-fi movie from the future where robots do everything. You do not have to lift a finger to make anything happen. They get your food, they produce your clothing and your materials and your technology, and everything else is being made automatically. And we have some sort of energy source that never is exhausted, whether it's solar, wind, geothermal, something along those lines, even nuclear power, that can make all these robots do the menial tasks. We want down now. That a lot of people are doing, as you know, and depending on for income. Once that happens, there are two possible outcomes. One is that we say, okay, now that we don't need that labor anymore, obviously, you know, the human mind is still going to have that built-in work ethic. We're still going to want to do something with our time, because it's going to take tens of thousands or millions of years, if we survive that long, for that behavior to go away. We all have this drive to do something constructive, right? But if we can't do something that directly benefits society, then we'll have to figure out something else that people can do with their time in order to be productive, number one. The alternative, I think, is that a few people or a few business entities or corporations, or however you like to think of them, take control of everything and have not most of, but all of the wealth. And then that leaves a whole lot of people who really don't fit in, so to speak. So this is a real social issue that's going to have to be addressed in the near future. And I'd love to find someone who was an expert on that to talk about. So hold on a second. I got to chase this cat out here. What are you doing in here? Let's see. The religious institutions are making to curtain the truth from the human race. Too much knowledge can lead to our self-doom. Yeah, you know, it's funny that you say that, Johnny, because at one point in time that was possible. Remember, they didn't allow people to read. But we've come so far now that, you know, not just the church can read religious text. And the knowledge is going to keep coming, I think, a lot faster. No one will do the work if you are self-employed. Oh, sorry, I'm back. Let me go forward a little bit here. Police officer still, but 34 years of it, had enough, retiring at end of year, run repair full time. Cool. Congratulations. In fact, 90% police here work 4 days, 10-hour shifts are the norm for police on shift work. My job's safe. Ever see robot take a bribe or kick the crap out of a criminal who deserves it? Well, you know, that's another thing. I've wondered about that as well. You know, we've got this whole debate about cameras on police officers, and probably good arguments on either side. But the question is this: if we reach a point in time where people say, you know what, we just need RoboCop. We need we need something that is not emotional, it's not biased, It's been programmed to operate to the letter of the law. We've worked out the bugs. I mean, this is going to be a long time, obviously. We're still trying to make sure that self-driving cars don't run over people. So it'll be a long time, I think, before we have law enforcement. Probably not in my lifetime. But eventually, law enforcement has got to make use of technology to better enforce the law, right? And to do it in an unbiased way that people can't criticize and question and say, well, this particular police officer is picking on this person or this group of people, or he knows them personally, or anything along those lines. If you take that factor out of the equation, then ultimately I think that you could expect to have a more fair law enforcement system, but obviously there would be many hurdles to work past to ever reach that point. And at the same time, think of the resistance from the public to say, well, you're going to strap a gun onto a machine and have it patrol the streets and settle domestic disputes. Yeah, that I think it's going to be a long time before that happens. But you never know. Companies selling subscription boxes are teaching humans to stay home. Yeah, that's a good point, Harvey. We're certainly doing a lot more from home nowadays. We have that already. Speed cameras killed traffic cops here. No emotion, don't care about excuses, show no leniency. Wow, that's pretty crazy. And I think it's just a sign of things to come. Like I said, I'm not saying good or bad, and I'm not saying it's going to go into full effect in probably in our lifetime. But if you think a few generations ahead, this technology is going to be available, and it is going to be highly effective at eliminating crime. So how far will we end up going with law enforcement and technology, and military and technology? I think is even scarier. But I assume our descendants will find out on that one. All right, friends, I'm going to wrap it up here. It's time to get off. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back Monday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And of course, next Thursday evening with Nate from Nate's Tech Services. I have his channel. Actually, I will put his channel down in the video description. I will also put the link to next week's live stream on as soon as I finish here, so that way if you want to set a reminder, click on the bell, put it in your calendar, do whatever you want to do. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to get away from technology and talk about something else for a change. And I think it's going. I know I'm going to enjoy it. I think you will too. So I hope to see you all there. And if not, you can always watch the replay, of course. But putting the comments in there, that's what makes it fun. All right, y'all have a great weekend. I will talk to you next time.